Hello, my name's Jeff, and welcome to the Handmade Tarot game, which is a complete system for understanding philosophy, magic, psychology, and having fun with your friends through a game of gestures like rock, paper, scissors, but expanded to include the four elements air, water, fire, and earth, and then applied to the 22 archetypes of the tarot, which are cornerstones of psychology as a whole once you understand them. And today we're diving into the very first of these archetypes, which is the Fool, and he's number 0. So he is the archetype of 0. Funny thing about the tarot, every single arcana or archetype card has a number on it. And these numbers teach you the value of the card. Okay, and this is very important to understand the tarot, that there's these like psychology of number. What does it mean to have 0? Okay, nothing. And how does this apply to this concept of the Fool? Well, the concept of nothing makes fools of us all. So we're gonna get into this deeper. But I just really want to emphasize that if you haven't studied numerology, this is going to be a great course to open up some of these ideas and principles to you, because this idea of understanding the meaning of numbers is so significant. It's like as important as understanding words as understanding numbers, like what the meaning of them can be if we're going to become symbolically literate. And so, yep, here we go, reading from the first chapter of my book. The first quote here from Einstein: "The difference between genius and stupidity is genius has its limits." And Voltaire: "The only way to comprehend what mathematicians mean by infinity is to contemplate the extent of human stupidity." Okay, so these two quotes kind of tie in together. Both of them are saying that stupidity is in some ways infinite. So this is going to tie in with the Fool, who is the archetype of 0, which literally means unfinite. Okay, here I read. "The Fool is the archetype of the spirit, and therefore illustrates life's founding metaphysical paradigm, chaos. Chaos is not merely disorder. Rather, it is another name for the creative contradiction that gives rise to and characterizes life. Carl Jung wrote in his Red Book that the only rule life has is that it has no rules. Likewise, Buddha's philosophy holds that permanence is an illusion that stifles the innate expansiveness of the mind. The tarot's Fool represents the life-giving power. The tarot's Fool represents the life-giving power of chaos in every credible manner. His motley green clothing, for example, represents the new life of spring that can burst forward like a dandelion through the pavement cracks. Likewise, we celebrate April Fool's Day by playing practical jokes on one another for a laugh. In chaos magic, laughter is the highest emotion because it contains all other emotions from grief to ecstasy. Peter Carroll points out that even crying is an underdeveloped form of laughter. Cultivating humor is a foundational practice for harnessing and applying chaos, aka life." Okay, likewise, you can see the Fool is on a cliff and he's about to walk off. And this is also symbolic of the number 0, which marks his perilous position in the tarot. 0 is nothingness, or as the Buddha describes it, no thingness. Okay, we're talking about the void on the other side of the cliff, nothingness. This number makes jokers of us all, for little do we realize that 0 is infinity. Infinity means unfinite, that is, without bounds. All numbers define and are defined by their bounds, except 0. Likewise, the Fool doesn't fit within the confines of any limit set by the mind or society, for better or for worse. He's just so empty-headed that he's practically a walking void. Indeed, the Fool's journey itself can seem as a result of nature's abhorrence of the vacuum that rests between his ears. Ironically, this makes him totally open to all experiences, and therefore the prime personality for the lessons throughout the tarot. Nevertheless, the Fool confronts one with whether ignorance is bliss, or, as the Buddha said, the root of all suffering. Regardless, you'll need to work with the Fool to reverse engineer a better future for yourself. Element: air. The elemental correspondence for the Fool is clear-cut: air. Even if the word fool wasn't derived from the Latin word follis, meaning windbag, everyone recognizes he is an airhead who is well above the clouds. Like a dandelion in the pavement crack, the fool represents the side of life that can break through anything. That's because nothing in life is ever truly fixed, at least when you take a transcendental view of things. This perspective is indicated by the elemental glyph for air, which is an upward pointing triangle with a horizontal line across it, representing the clouds at the peak of a mountain. The fool graphically represents the air glyph as he stands on the side of a mountain. His body language suggests he's about to stroll off the side of the cliff because of how vacant his mind is. This symbolizes the great fall of the spirit into the mundanity of the world, and in so doing, mediocrity. We become mediocre individuals when we conform to routine and habitual thinking, and behaviors to normalize our identity in life. The madness of the fool represents the underlying urging of chaos within us to cast all such illusions to the wind, since life can turn upside down in an instant. Just as there is no stopping the wind, there is no way to arrest progress. Thus the fool is compelled to move on ahead, even if it means walking straight into thin air. Nonetheless, if there was ever a person who could walk on air, it is the fool. Since science has made such miracles taboo, most would never consider it. Unfortunately, the same deterministic science also presumes to dispose of freedom itself. For what is a miracle but the universe acting freely? In other words, if you feel free for once in a while, why shouldn't the universe be as well? In sum, if you don't test the limits of reason, how will you ever know what they are? Chances are, if you are stressed, then reason already has you at your limit already. Gesture. Open/waving hand. At its most fundamental level, the wave is the gesture of all possibilities. By displaying an open hand to another, a person shows they are without hostile intent of a weapon, and therefore open to interaction. Indeed, how else can you perceive something but with an open hand? How else can you receive something but with an open hand? Perhaps this is why many saintly and holy people are shown with their hands held wide in miraculous benediction. Really, the miracle of the open hand is that it suggests something modern language finds impossible to express, a paradox. By opening your hand to another, you not only demonstrate your willingness to give, but your readiness to receive as well. You are ready to embrace and be embraced, perhaps in a handshake with another. Thus, our bodies demonstrate a logic far superior to the one conjured up by the mind, an achievement so plain, ancient, and everyday that we fail to see it for what it is worth. Yes, the fool is one who is out of his mind, but that is because he is in his body. Make this gesture when you want to greet your own. That marks the end of my audiobook, my chapter on the fool. If you want, you can go on to the next chapter, The Magician, when I post it. Or you can stick around and listen to me ramble on in a long-winded way about my favorite tarot card, the Fool, and why I love it so much, and all these amazing things that I think about when I interact with this card, the primary one in the deck. And yeah, there's so many different symbols involved with this that I think, I don't even touch on in the book, because I'm really trying to keep it very brief and to the point so people get an idea of what's the real meaning of the archetype. And then the other symbols that are there can kind of fall into place once you understand the bigger picture. So just picking at one at random here, here's this mountain that's behind him. And the mountain is a really important symbol. You can't underestimate. This is the background of the Fool, the background of chaos, this mountain. And according to Aleister Crowley, the mountain is the most sacred of all terrestrial symbols, stark, rugged, and immovable in its aspiration to the highest, thus up as it is by the titan energy of hidden fire. That was a quote from him. So, talking about some vast power residing inside the mountains. Okay, so what is going on with him being at the top of the mountain? What's he doing up there? In Nietzsche's book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, the protagonist, Zarathustra, comes down from his cave up in the top of the mountains where he's, you can almost see a cave maybe in the side of this picture here that he might have left. And as he leaves the cave, he comes down to interact with the people and teach them the things that he's learned in his wisdom. But people think he's crazy, people think he's a fool. So there's also maybe this idea of him being Zarathustra, bringing down the energy of the hidden fire, like a Prometheus. Okay, so Yeah, perhaps this is, implied a little bit by this rose that he's holding. Maybe it represents a different kind of fire, a fire of life that is going to bloom. Okay, what else do we got? Here is another cool thing from Carl Jung about the fool that I believe. Here's a fun quote. The fact that many a man going his own way ends in ruin means nothing. He must obey his own law, as if it were a daemon whispering to him of new and wonderful paths. There are not a few who are called awake by the summons of the voice, whereupon they are at once set apart from the others, feeling themselves confronted with a problem about which the others know nothing. In most cases, it is impossible to explain to the others what has happened. Any understanding is walled off by impenetrable prejudices. You are no different than anybody else, they will chorus. There is no such thing, or if there is such a thing, it is immediately branded as morbid. He is at once set apart, isolated, as he is resolved to obey the law that commands him from within. His own law, everybody will say, but he knows better. It is the law. And he goes on. The only meaningful life is the life that strives for the individual realization, absolute and unconditional, of its own particular plan. To the extent that a man is untrue to the law of his being, he has failed to realize his life's meaning. The undiscovered being within us is a living part of the psyche. Classic Chinese philosophy names the interior way Tao, and likened it to the flow of water that moves irresistibly towards its goal. To rest in Tao means fulfillment, wholeness, one's destination reached, one's mission done, the beginning, end in perfect realization, the meaning of existence, unique in all things. Thanks, Carl Jung. So, yeah, this is really cool because he's talking about what sends people on their ways in their journeys. And in this case, we see the Fool setting off on a journey. This is the journey of the tarot that he'll be going through, the path of the Fool, as my favorite tarot teacher, Michael Tessarian, talks about. This path of the Fool is really like him stepping off into the unknown, into the zero, into the void of becoming, the place where ideas like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the rest of these numbers that represent experience and knowledge will come forth. But he's also kind of like at the place he needs to be. This is the idea of like we will, at the very end of all of our travels, we will return to where we started and we'll know it again for the first time. That's T.S. Eliot, the poet. And so, yeah, we have this Fool card representing this point where it's like, yeah, we're kind of fools to kind of rush on outside of ourselves for looking for something other than what we already are, our own personal Tao. And, the paradox here is like, you can only get there if you're willing to just stop and smell the roses, like if you just give up going anywhere. And then that's ultimately where you want to be more than anywhere. So this card is definitely a card that's kind of representing the eternal moment of the now, the power of now, and yeah, this is really, really cool concept to develop. So the way that the beginning and the end of development really appear very much the same. Ken Wilber calls this the pre-trans fallacy, which is to say that to people who are in conventional modes of consciousness, something that is pre-conventional looks a lot like something that's post-conventional. So, the difference here is that if you are post-conventional, you've learned the conventions and you've decided to break them because they do not work. Pre-conventional is someone who has not even reached that level of maturity yet where they can function, and so therefore, their lashing out looks bad. But to the conventional mind, someone who is both pre-conventional and post-conventional often looks the same. So a great example of this, I think, was the Occupy Wall Street movement, which had lots of people who were post-conventional in it. People like myself who recognized that the system really just needed one big fix, which is just to get the money out of politics, with the Citizens United ruling, adding all this money into DC through lobbyists giving corporations personhood, you know. And this is a major problem. Anyone with half a brain knows that this is going to, corrupt democracy, which it clearly has in the 13 years since it was passed in 2011. So anyways, that was why I was there with the Occupy movement. And then we also had pre-conventional people who, just were kind of like struggling and not able to really fit in anywhere and really needed something to just do. And, people who were definitely overlooked, but, certain people who were infantile in their understanding of, what the movement could accomplish or should accomplish, just asking for handouts basically, when all they really need is just to fix the system so that way they can help themselves. And, yeah, so anyways, to most people though, those two kind of got lumped together. What's the deal with that? Well, it's just people who are breaking the status quo are, often together, like look the same as people who, don't understand the status quo and so on and so forth. So this concept of the pre-trans fallacy is also kind of developed by Nietzsche. And this is really cool. He describes this in Thus Spake Zarathustra concerning the three metamorphoses of spirit. Okay, first there's the spirit, which is this fool, okay? There's this transformations that occurs. The very first transformation the spirit makes in its materialization, I guess you could call it, is the spirit becomes a camel. And it becomes a camel because it sees strength as the ability to lift heavy loads, okay? But then, later on, the spirit discovers these loads are not good, and it becomes a lion. And this becomes a lion when it has the dire need to fight those who force their burdens on you. And they do this by putting shame and guilt on you, which is something I call shilt, okay? You use this word, shame and guilt together. Don't shilt on me, okay? Ironically, the motivation to fight this shilt is often drawn from such shame and guilt, okay? So what that means is that, I'm fighting because this shame and guilt that's being put on me offends me. And if I can be offended by this in some way, maybe I believe it in some regard. It's not absolutely ridiculous to me. So therefore, I'm giving it power. Okay, so this shows you where the third spirit transformation is going, which is from the lion into a child. And so here's the quote from Nietzsche. He says, "But tell me, my brethren, what the child can do, which even the lion could not do. Why hath the preying lion still to become a child?" And here he says it, "Innocence is the child, and forgetfulness a new beginning, a game, a self-rolling wheel, a first movement, a holy yea." Okay, so that is most definitely what the fool means to me. He is the holy yea. Okay, yeah. Yeehaw. This primary, venturing forth of spirit, no matter what the consequences. Was creation such a great idea? Think God maybe wondered, why did I do that? Well, maybe he didn't think about it. Maybe he just did it, right? This is what the Fool teaches you. This is the very first card in the tarot, and it really is like the foundation for understanding everything. It's the underlying metaphysical paradigm. Okay, the Fool did it because he wanted to. Okay, this reminds me of the very end of The Matrix. Spoiler alert, but yeah, when Neo, is getting beat down by Agent Smith and they just can't stop him, and he's like, "Why don't you die?" And he's like, "Because I will that I continue to go on," and at a certain level, that's really the ultimate teaching. Why does anything exist? Because we will it to. And, that is a teaching that is, not as satisfying maybe just like to the mind, but to the spirit, that's all that you need. That's the teaching that, just keep on keeping on and moving forward, especially with the spirit of yes, which really can just unlock so much potential if we just are able to say yes. And yeah, so one of the other cool parts about that quote is that Nietzsche calls the child a self-rolling wheel. And this really underscores one of the most important aspects of the tarot that I'm going to hopefully talk more about as I get into other chapters, like the actual Wheel of Fortune. But the tarot itself is arranged as a giant wheel. Okay, so this is shown in the Fool card. Okay, so the very first card of the tarot buddies up with the very last card of the tarot, and they have this order that they go through. And that's because the tarot is actually this like spiral. It's a progressive, like developmental, consciousness that moves, and you can follow this once you, look at the patterns here. It involves some Kabbalah, understanding the tree of life, and the dimensions of personal growth from the physical and the spiritual and the emotional and the mental, and across these archetypes. And I'm going to share with you how this evolution grows through numbers, which is like the coding of the philosophy in here. Right now we're looking at the philosophy of zero. Okay, but what came before zero? Well, this is something I'm just realizing actually, but if the Fool is the, zero card, then the 77th card of the tarot, the last card of the tarot would be the wealth card, the 10 of coins, the 10 of pentacles, the 10 of discs. Okay, so that's the earth card, and that is usually symbolized by like a lot of money. Okay, like 10 coins together, in a cool pattern, or something like that. And what do we see on the Fool's shoulder? Oh, could it be? It's actually a purse, and it's holding what's inside of there. It's holding that money. Okay, what does this imply? It implies that the Fool retains the wealth that was built up from the last cycle over his shoulder. It's not directly apparent to him, but it is, it is still there indirectly, ready to come to his aid when he needs it the most. Kind of like a character in a story who gets a special like item that later on becomes like a life-saving item, and they don't know what it is yet, but it's still there for them. So yeah, the tarot, what's happening here is we're seeing a process of moving from this pure spirit, pure chaos, okay, of the Fool, all this energy, all the way up to the very end of the tarot, the 10 of coins, which is the, kind of the final manifestation of materiality, which is what the coins represent. They're pentacles. They represent the earth. Okay, so we see right there, we see the dichotomy between, spirit and matter. Okay, and once you have basically what this says is that when you finally get to the very end of the road, you get your pot of gold, all of your dreams come true. Well, what is it time to do then? It's time to go back to sleep and make up new dreams. Okay, so like life really wouldn't be all that swell if we just got everything we wanted all the time. I mean, it's obvious when you say it, but you don't really think about it that often. You don't think about how the things that are really hard for you are actually what make life worth living, because you're working through them, and it's giving you, something that's keeping you in your, skin in the game. I mean, if you just have everything handed to you, then you really do get quite a few psychological problems. You really got to find this cool place of living on the edge, so that you're still advancing yourself but not falling off it. So really this image of the Fool once again. And I want to say too, like he's got these coins over his shoulder so that, as he, advances, he can draw upon what lessons have come before. So really the tarot is not just a wheel, it's actually like a spiral. Only the spiral is going down. It's this spiraling downwards, and this is counterintuitive, but in the Western occult philosophy, it's that in order to go up, you must first go down. Okay, and we see this, for example, in Plato's cave, one of the oldest analogies ever. Like that the wisdom to be found is like you go deeper into the cave, and then you see the fire. You see that, and then from that you come out, and then you see the sun. So there is this give and take notion. Something else that's really cool about the Fool is his outfit. Okay, so he's wearing a motley outfit, a weird, clashing setup. And this is what you see in all the different Fool cards is, just a lot of like chaotic gear that he's wearing. And this is actually a deep teaching. This is showing you how the Fool, harnesses many different avenues of energy, some of which are going to be contradictory to become, this personified version of spirit. And yeah, this is how the tarot works, okay? It gives you these conflicting forces, and then out of those conflicts, there's creative tension. And then from that, life, okay? So we're not really seeking a balance, or moderation. We're seeking, dynamic equilibration, where you go to one extreme and then you go back to another. So you're really getting the most out of life in all directions. And yeah, the tarot teaches us a lot about this in some pretty cool ways. All of the tarot cards have this numerology component where if you go like 10, exactly 10 cards up, you'll get an opposite for every single one of the cards. If I go 10 cards up from the Fool, I get the Wheel of Fortune, which is this kind of like fixed path. Everything is in the wheel. Everything's, held together, whereas the Fool represents unbound, awareness, unbounded, spontaneity. And then say we go to the Magician, the Trickster archetype, 10 cards up from that is the Justice archetype, number 11, the two ones together. And yeah, if you got a magician, what is he doing? He's pulling tricks. Well, justice is the exact opposite of that. That's people, trying to seek a fair understanding, get things equal, each to their own. Well, of course, that's the exact opposite of what the magician does. He's an illusionist. He sows discord. The same thing can be true for basically all of the archetypes. So if you look at the 3 and the 13, here's a good example. There's 3, which is the Empress, and 13, which is death. Now, the Empress represents Mother Earth and life, the empire of the earth, continually growing and evolving. Whereas death is, obviously the reverse of that. And we see these pairs go throughout the tarot. Card 5, the Hierophant, is a spiritual teacher, and the opposite of that is card 15, which is the Devil. The Devil is like an anti-spiritual teacher, or maybe you could consider him a material teacher of the material reality. Okay, so these pairs go back and forth, and it just goes to show that this tarot is built with this dynamic tension in mind. These numbers are, helping you to develop a consciousness that integrates these opposites and, transcends them, but it doesn't always look super pretty. Like the Fool's, coat he's wearing, this is a motley mashup, okay? And this represents different paradigms being sewn together in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. There's no one perspective that you should be holding, because, ultimately, that's just the way that reality works. Reality isn't one cohesive whole. It is a lot more than that. And coming to accept that there's these differences, not only in reality but also within ourselves, is really a key part of what the tarot is all about, what individuation is all about. And this Fool card really is helping you to lighten up about it and really understand this is just fundamental. I take this Fool archetype very seriously. As a kid, I played the Fool all the time because I knew that it was a lot better to be, funny and make jokes, even at my own expense, than deal with, just the mundanity of boredom that I experienced, like, say, at school. And, I definitely feel like I was way ahead of my time. I could have, so many people laughing based on the jokes I'd make, but I also help people grow smarter. Like, I taught my little brother how to read by the time he was 3 years old, and I was just 5. And other stuff too. My brother, he's an actor and, also a musician. And when he was little, I used to pretend like his music playing really bothered me. And, I'd be like, oh, stop playing it or whatever. But, ultimately I was just fine with it. But it made him sing more and it made him laugh more in doing it and brought him more joy. So I was cool with that. It's a great way to fill the time, is to do something like that. And I think this takes on cosmic significance. I think that that's maybe what we're also seeing at a much deeper level for why this world is the way it is. I think we're being indulged, being played along in this kind of a play, like the world's a play. And yeah, I think this concept of the Fool really plays home both within ourselves and in a grander sense, that we deliberately
are opaque to what's going on behind the scenes. This is a kind of a tenet of phenomenology, this idea that what you experience, the phenomenon, is actually an external projection of yourself. What you consider like your senses are actually a slowed down form of thought. This is what Merleau-Ponty talks about. There's this process of kind of not introjecting, but extrojecting, sending it out in front of you. And we're kind of blind to this process because, this is how we create the external world, which, as we know, isn't really external. This is happening within our own brains, within our own senses. And so there's some level of us that is, engaged with the environment, which is what we're going to see in the culmination of the Arcana, the World card, which is, when you realize that the whole world is a part of you and you are a part of the whole world. And this process of creation is ongoing. But, right here in the Fool, it's just sort of like something that we're not quite aware of. And yeah, there's more to be said for the Fool, is that the Fool really is not sometimes like one of the most intelligent things you can do is be the Fool. Say if you were in a medieval court and you were to tell the king, hey, I don't really think you're doing a smart job with that war over there. It's really costing us and whatever. And the king would say, okay, well, thanks for telling me, and off with your head. You know why? Because he can't, he can't handle no disrespect. So he's going to take you out. But, if you were the court jester, oh, you say it in a silly voice, and suddenly, everyone's laughing, and the king's like, yeah, I'm not taking that too seriously, but I do hear what was said, and that's going to help me to make the decision. That's right. The court jester was maybe one of the most important people at the court, because he was the only one who could really tell the king what was going on and not be, tortured for it or something. So the point here is that playing the Fool is just like an extremely ethical thing to do. In fact, it's people's resistance to the energy of the Fool, to being, funny and letting themselves be mocked and, thought of as like lowly. It's people's resistance to this archetype that really creates so many of the conflicts that we see in the world today. Like, just at the very bare minimum, we're talking about people's comparing status to other people. People who want to be higher status than another. This is, the absolute opposite of the Fool mentality. There's zero hierarchy with the Fool card zero. Okay, so then you have people who make a mistake, and instead of just owning it and being like, I'm sorry, like I messed up, like whatever, I'm learning, people are instead, I'm going to double down on that, and I'm not going to apologize because I can't handle the stress, or my identity, my ego can't handle being not looking good for a moment. You know what I'm saying? And people have that viewpoint because they don't understand that reality itself is a mishmash of different things being sewn together within ourselves, like the Fool's coat. Another way in which playing the Fool is like the most ethical thing you can do is when you're actually already in a conflict. If someone's coming at you with some kind of an aggression, we know that's like a more primal force. But if you're crazy, that's even more primal than aggression. Okay, there's a deeper well. Insanity, or as we call it, madness, trumps aggression in a lot of ways. So what do I mean? I mean, somebody's got some beef with you, and then suddenly you show someone that you're crazy, just a little bit. You show them your crazy side, and they realize you are not a target. What does the word target even mean? It means like a bullseye. It means they can see and pinpoint exactly where they want to get you. Well, if you are crazy, like the Fool for a moment, you do something weird, you do something funky, they're going to be like, not into it, because they're looking for that target. Well, don't be a target. Don't be, perfectly round and centered. Suddenly throw your center outside of yourself. I've done this before, when someone's coming up on me about something, and then suddenly I just show them, oh, you don't want to mess with like how serious or how weird I can be right now. Like, this is not, I don't live in your paradigm. Don't try, you don't want to meet me here. And that's just a great way to get along without violence. Now, this is something that people might have some trouble with, like in your mind, you're going to be like, I don't think I could do that. Someone's coming at me. I don't want to suddenly, show weakness or something like that. But, this is one of these areas where praxis, that is, the actual work of doing something, takes precedence over theory, theoria, which is, this kind of projection of the mind. If it works, it works. And this is really a fundamental principle of the Fool in general. Here's a cool fact. Illiterate people, without like a math system that we know of, were able to build like perfect monolithic structures that aligned and corresponded with stars and the geometry of the earth. And this is something that's quite the mystery, if you look at like what we're told about what humans were, supposedly aware of, 5,000 years ago or longer when they built the pyramids, or these other really cool structures that are also throughout the Americas and everything else. Well, this is a proof right here that theories of knowledge about how to do something are actually secondary to the practical know-how that rises up from within. So this is another way in which the Fool's energy really takes form. We don't always have to know how we're doing something in order for it to work out. This is a way of really helping you to be confident with not knowing. And there's a great level of power in that. So many of people's problems are stemmed from fear of the unknown. And when you embrace that, you really do open up the way for not only yourself, but other people as well. This Fool, he represents the reclaiming of this power for us. We are lost in the maze of the mind today with our dichotomies. I mean, we are so polarized today with, these different paradigms that are seemingly, going against one another. But, this is really just a maze, and we need the aimlessness of the Fool. Lastly, it's interesting to note that the tarot, which can be translated to star, is a complete astrological system. Each major card in the tarot is associated with a particular planet, star, constellation. The Fool, for example, is associated with Uranus, which is particularly fascinating, given this connection between Prometheus and Uranus. In Richard Tarnas's book, Prometheus the Awakener, Tarnas says when he studies the meanings of, Uranus in astrology, he realized that every quality astrologers associate with the planet Uranus was reflected in the myth of Prometheus: the initiation of radical change, the passion for freedom, the defiance of authority, the act of cosmic rebellion against a universal structure to free humanity of bondage, the urge to transcend limitation, the intellectual brilliance and genius, the element of excitement and risk. So also Prometheus' style in outwitting the gods, when he used subtle stratagems and unexpected timing to upset the established order. He too was called a cosmic trickster, and the resonant symbol of Prometheus' fire conveyed at once several meanings: the creative spark, cultural technological breakthrough, the enhancement of human autonomy, the liberating gift from the heavens, sudden enlightenment, intellectual and spiritual awakening, all of which astrologers consider to be associated with the planet Uranus, which we can see from our study of the Fool is also clearly the Fool card. So we're seeing perhaps the Fool is Prometheus, and this opens up a whole world of meanings. One of the ones that stands out to me the most is that Prometheus is a Titan, and what he's giving to us is this gift of fire, which will help us to become Titans. This is why Zeus punishes Prometheus so horribly, to this torture of having his liver pecked out every single night by an eagle when he's chained to a rock, only to have it regrow and then repeat the process. Obviously, that's a pretty serious torture. Now, why was it so bad? Because by giving humans the gift of fire, Zeus knew that humanity, with this gift of technology, could surpass the gods. And what this means is that, we could, each one of us, become Titans. And I think that's what the archetype of the Fool is really teaching us, is that, what is a Titan? It's like this natural force, basically. We think of like a Titan of the ocean or a Titan of a volcano, this titanic energy that's just so powerful. And it's greater than just like your ego. And if you're willing to work with the energy of the Fool, you can become titanic. And this is another deeper teaching about the Fool, that the Fool represents like the universal life force energy that moves through everything, and each one of us gets a portion of that. And when we are faithful and, authentic, true to that type of life force energy, we become, the movement of the whole river. You know what I'm saying? Like, you suddenly are in the Tao, and now you have the whole universe working through and with you, and that makes you titanic. And it also, even though the whole universe is working through and with you, you are still set apart in some way where you don't fit in with the world. It's this weird paradox that exists, but that is the way that it works. I think the problem is something to do with like systematizing knowledge. This effort to create like a system where everything fits in order is like building castles of sand, on the side of the ocean. They're going to get washed away. So, this idea is to not get held down, which is why this archetype of the fool, Prometheus, coming down, is so fundamental to all of our growth. And then this all ties into the, question of free will. If there wasn't this element of chaos, of spontaneity, driving everything, there wouldn't be free will. If everything was perfectly ordered and everything was well laid out for you, you really wouldn't have the ability to choose. We need a certain level of unknowingness just so we can have that experience of free will, which is maybe the most important of the human values, freedom. Because everything else takes place from freedom. This is just unbelievable insight. We like never talk about it, but the ability to choose something is like more important than any other virtue, because those virtues become just stupid if you don't choose them willingly. If you're forced to go do something, then and you do it, like I helped all these people, but I only did it because I needed to, if I didn't do it, I would be hurt in some way or something like that. Then instead of you showing niceness, now you're just trying to save your own butt. Something like that. All of these different things that if you didn't choose them yourself, then it's not a virtue. So this really makes freedom like the quintessential virtue. And the Fool teaches us that we need randomness to break free of cycles of conditioning. Randomness strengthens materials. So, for instance, we heat a blade so that its molecules become excited. We warm it up, and then they rearrange as they cool. So, likewise, mutation, that's also a random process. That's shuffling of the genes that happens between parents and the creation of every offspring in the animal kingdom. Okay, so again, this is this shuffling of the deck that's represented by the Fool. And I can only imagine what kind of potency exists in mushrooms, which are known to have like 17,000 different sexes. Not really, but like maybe like I think it's upwards of like closer to 100. And the more randomness that exists in a system, the more resilient it can be, the more proactive and adaptive. And that's it for my discussion of the Fool. I hope you've enjoyed it. Take the time to go look at the other symbols of the Fool that I didn't go into. Look at other people's interpretations and kind of make your own, keeping with the spirit of the Fool. And I hope I see you with me on the next card, the Magician. Thank you.